Hi, T Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Oracle of the Self. Today is your coaching session number 41. Thought you guys might find it interesting to know that as of completing session 40, you have now gone through as much training as people who get certified to read individual change grids with individual clients would go through. The ChangeWorks professionals who do group profiling and have to read the really big profiles with thousands of respondents and all that, that takes a bit more training. But no, by and large, when it comes to ChangeWorks itself, you guys have gone through all of it. So,
yay!
Hey, you!
Yay!
So, yeah, that doesn't mean I'm sending you certificates, but nevertheless, you've gone through that amount of training. So let's kind of
certificate, but it won't be about this.
Well, that's certainly true. I could always send out a certificate of completion, but as far as a license goes, not so much. By the way, those of you, if you're interested in it, the reason why you can't be certified is because you have to read a bunch of grids. You only get good at reading grids by reading grids. And so, it's the equivalent of barber college. No one's going to give you a license as a barber if you've never cut hair. So, you got to be able to actually read change grids and, kind of pass muster on that side of things. But again, this is the Oracle of the Self. The only thing we really concern ourselves with on this program is that you're able to create and read a change grid for yourself, or if we put up a change grid and you guys fill it out, that you can look at it and kind of know what your own responses actually mean. So, and we'll be doing more of that as time unfolds. So let's pick up where we left off last time around. We're going through this nature of change kind of thing, and we're up to the point where we're talking about control. And we did a very slow walk through the 4 aspects of control, and hopefully you guys got a lot of good insights about how your brain goes about processing a need for a change or an opportunity to make a change, so that you can really decide, is it going to bring you what you really want, which we already all know is control. If it's not going to help you to gain more control or to get rid of the things that are taking you away from fully leveraged control and all that, get rid of the stumbling blocks, and there's always a price to be paid. So we talked about this in grand detail. Does anyone have any questions, comments about the 4 aspects of control before we move on to some concept soup? No? Okay, so let's get into some concept soup. I don't know where my concept soup slide is, but this is something I do in all my programs. I always say to my audiences, yeah, I'm going to teach you some specific tools and techniques, but along the way, I'm going to serve you several bowls of concept soup. And in these bowls, you're just going to have a bunch of ideas that I toss your way. And hopefully by the end of your bowl of soup, you go, no, these concepts really do work together. They do make sense, and et cetera, et cetera. So as we kind of work our way through this, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, then just feel free to chime in there. So the first one, people change in order to gain or maintain control. All right. Any questions about that? You go like, no, that's absolutely, that's spot on. If I'm going to make a change, I'm going to make it because I'm trying to gain or maintain control over whatever.
Absolutely.
It's just, this is the way it is. People change in order to gain or maintain control. People will not change if they're already in control. Now, more specifically, it's people won't change if they believe they are already in control. There's a lot of people out there who believe they're in control, and we go like, nah, not so much. But, as long as you hold that belief that things are already as good as they're going to get, and no reason to put all that into jeopardy, what's the likelihood of you making a change if you felt like everything was exactly as it could be, should be, ought to be? What do you think?
A little bit less.
Not likely.
Not likely. In fact, it's because, see, I need to rearrange these. But you guys are the advanced group. I'm okay with all that. But down here, slide 38, people are not resistant to change. They're resistant to losing control. And so if you were in a situation where you felt like you were already in control, making a change introduces an element of risk, because when you're making that change, what are you doing to the control you've already kind of, gathered together or built for yourself? You could be putting that into jeopardy And why would anybody willingly put the control they've already established into jeopardy if they didn't think there was, a possibility of gaining greater control, or at least maintaining the control in a more efficient, elegant sort of way? So the moment you encounter resistance from anybody, obviously we don't want you to dismiss their response by saying, people are resistant to change, because we already know that's hogwash. We know that people are resistant to losing control, and that's evidence of intelligence. So let's just bask in that for a moment. The moment you actually display resistance, what are you actually saying to the other person, or to yourself if you're just examining an option, when you go like, nah, I'm going to resist? So again, I said, this is an illustration of, or evidence of intelligence. Why am I saying that? Why is resistance evidence of intelligence?
Well, because you have an awareness that is giving you a certain body of knowledge.
Yeah, and that awareness is leading you to the understanding that to move forward could actually result in what?
Loss of control.
Loss of control. And if you're a smart person, would you ever do anything that you believed going into it was going to equal a loss of control for you?
No.
No, you wouldn't do that. If you did do that, we wouldn't think you were all that intelligent. So, because that just don't make sense. Now, I think this is an important thing to know. In general terms for tension management, maybe to a somewhat lesser degree in the world of the oracle of the self, pure self application for all this kind of stuff. But whenever you encounter someone who seems to be resistant, they're not resistant to losing, to change itself. They're resistant to losing control. So what we say is that whenever you encounter resistance, you should ask the question, in what way do you believe you will lose control by, moving forward with this, or taking this action, or taking my advice, whatever fits into the conversation. So in what way do you think you would lose control by following through with whatever it is that this change represents? Now, when you do that, and we do this extensively whenever we're in a sales kind of a situation, because, if you really learn about Master Stream, you learn that it's a relatively objection-free way of selling. And the reason why we don't get objections is because we do things far earlier in the conversation to reveal where these potential objections are going to be waiting for us. And one of the ways we can shake them out from very early on is by asking the question, in what way do you think you will lose control by following through on the advice, by listening to what I have to say, by whatever ring fits into the conversation? As you can probably imagine, when we first ask someone that question, they kind of just shake their heads because they've never thought of it in those terms, right? No one's ever challenged them and said, this resistance that you're displaying has nothing to do with the change and everything to do with the control side of what this change might bring into your reality. What do you think you're going to lose as a result of making this change? Now, obviously, from a sales perspective, that allows us to better address those concerns and deal with those concerns before we're, at the end of things where we're asking for a decision. We can build it into our presentation. If you guys are using these techniques in your interactions with other people, by all means, if you encounter resistance, just say to them, I'm really curious. How do you think following through on this might affect you? I mean, the words we're using specifically, in what ways do you think you're going to lose control? Anytime I'm giving you these word sets, I just want you to know I'm looking for you to follow through on the spirit of the word set, as opposed to the exact words themselves. That doesn't mean you can't use the exact words, but you're welcome to make it more conversational, however you want. So I'm just really curious, how do you think things would turn out if you did what I was suggesting you do, or if you did make this change that you're debating?
Is that question what the bottom two of those four aspects of control really asking?
Well, obviously, I think that you're absolutely aligned with what the matrix is showing us. In all likelihood, what's the answer to that question going to be? Well, I think it would just cost a lot of money. I don't feel like spending, or I don't think it's going to give me what I really want. So it could be pointing to something that is down here, but it could also point to a lack of sufficient value shown on the upper half of things. So it's definitely involving the matrix, but and I would say you're right by and large. Their answer, when you say, in what way do you think you're going to lose control? They're going to say, well, I don't want to have other people in my business, or I don't want to lose my control over my time or whatever. I don't have the time to do all this sort of stuff. So I do think by and large, you're going to hear something from the lower two quadrants, but it's also possible for the person to say, I get that there's some value in what you're saying. I get that there's some benefit. It just doesn't feel like it's enough for the effort I have to put forward. So I don't want to put forth, I don't want to gain a lot of effort I have to put on something, but I also want to gain something sufficient that it's worth the cost. You're with me. So occasionally it'll be upstairs instead of downstairs. Okay. All right. So now you can also apply this to yourself. It does take a lot of self-awareness for one to realize that they are resistant in their own thoughts. So when you think about a change that you're considering making, or that has just been put out there as something that the world should consider, changing or whatever, now you get that dialogue happening in your own head. And yeah, there may be voices of other people that are coming up into that dialogue going on between your ears. So things you've heard before, things you've read before, other people's opinions and thoughts and insights. But sooner or later, it's going to get down to you making the decision about you. And if you don't feel like you're ready to move forward with that decision, it could be very useful for you to just stop for a second and say, in what way do I think I would actually lose control if I did do whatever it is that's in front of me? So it can most definitely help you inside of the oracle of the self to become more aware of what your value equation is really all about. Thoughts about that? Questions? No?
No, it's pretty clear.
All righty. So in order for someone to change, they must feel out of control. So again, we were right at people will not change if they're already in control. So if we accept that as a pretty much tried and true, point you can take to the bank, then we need to look at this one. So that would mean that in order for someone to change, they have to feel out of control. And as I believe I said last time around, this feeling of being out of control does not require you to be at the edge of a cliff ready to fall to an untimely demise. It could be a whisper. It could just be the slightest feeling that things are not as they could be, should be, ought to be. And that alone could satisfy the requirement that you feel out of control. So it doesn't have to be a big, profound thing on the out of control spectrum, but it has to be present. Whether it's a whisper or whether it's a voice screaming in your head, it needs to be there. Or what's the likelihood that you're going to put much, if any, energy into it?
Not likely.
Just not likely. Just not likely. So again, in order for someone to change, they must feel out of control. If you're in one of my regular live audiences, I'd be saying to you, you must feel 3 words. And I say it a dozen times during a presentation. And at one point, I even stopped saying you feel 3 words. I just hold up 3 fingers and the whole audience goes out of control. Out of control. Right. So we got to make sure these principles are installed. So you're eating this soup. It's becoming part of your cellular makeup. Now we'll take that. If people agree to this, they have to feel out of control in order to change. We can go to the next one. Now we start talking a little bit about value, because the word value starts to pop up just kind of incidentally as you're talking about control. I promise you very early on, the word value is going to pop in here, but I don't think people have ever really done much of a deep dive into what value really means in general, and certainly not specific to themselves. So here we go. So the more out of control a person feels, the more valuable a solution becomes. So value equals control. The more out of control a person feels, the more valuable a solution becomes. Now, at its surface, people tend to think of value in monetary terms. So I can illustrate this in those terms, but that's just one of many, many ways that the value equation can express itself. But if I said to you, how much money are you willing to spend for a bottle of water?
It'll change if you're thirsty.
Yeah, well, exactly. It depends on how thirsty I am. So the more out of control a person feels, the more valuable the solution becomes. So that's going to hold true no matter what area of life you're actually looking at. The value that something holds is determined entirely by the individual who's evaluating that option. So nobody can tell us that a bottle of water in and of itself has value. I can tell you how valuable it is based on how much water I already have, how readily available water is to me, how long I've been without water, whatever the case may be. So I know that some of you are living in areas of the country where when a big storm comes along, you lose electricity or lots of storm waters, the drinking water can become less, I don't want to say palatable is right, but less healthy for one to drink. In those situations, you can see how valuable this resource of water is going to become. But the value it has is determined entirely by the individual who is evaluating the option. Now, any thoughts, comments about this one? No? Agree, disagree?
Well, it's
Totally.
probably important to understand, the person's definition of value and what they currently value to have a meaningful discussion.
Exactly. And that's where, we're doing this as a sales training course, obviously the nature of change. For everything but this Oracle the Self-Training program we started 41 weeks ago, every program I have ever done, bar none, begins with the nature of change. And so when you talk about the nature of change in front of a sales audience, and we get to this point, I would be saying to them, how many of you believe that your products and services have value? And every hand goes up. And I said, you don't get to make that decision. That decision gets made by the individual who's evaluating whatever it is you're there to talk about. The only value your product or service actually has is bestowed upon it by the person who's performing the valuation. Does this make sense? And I go,
Yeah.
now the audience always goes like, wait. And I said, I've been training this program for a very long time. Throw your best objection my way. I promise you, I am prepared. So I did that. But, we can't say that something has inherent value. We could say it has inherent potential value, depending on who's evaluating it and what's going on in their particular life. But in and of itself, it doesn't have much value. We've done extensive sales training in the financial services industry, everything from banking through insurance products, investments, everything you can find in between. And it's interesting how often, particularly with an insurance audience, I say to them, is life insurance a valuable thing? And they always say yes. And I say it depends entirely on the individual who's evaluating the option. So for example, let's say that I'm a young adult and just getting married, getting out there in the serious work world, starting a family, et cetera, et cetera. Let's think about the value that life insurance has in that scenario versus what value life insurance has to someone who is independently wealthy, in fact, make them filthy rich, who are already in their 90s and have no one that they care to leave any money to whatsoever. In which of those two scenarios would you say you could predict that the potential value is far greater? Younger
The
people?
first.
Right. That's right. Now, but then the insurance people always say, yeah, but insurance as an investment too, because it's going to have, you can sell it out at a certain point, blah, blah, blah. I promise you that there would have been other investments you could have put that money into that might have performed better and served you better. So it is true that at a certain point in life, you might start looking at insurance/investment sorts of options, things that have like an annuity element to them, where in the short run, they're giving your family some sort of protection, but in the long run, they do have some cash value that you can reclaim when it comes time to surrender it. But that's different product than plain old everyday life insurance,
Mhm.
right? So
Exactly.
yeah, so again, we can look at any and every product you can think of. For example, if I said to you, does food have value?
Mhm.
We would certainly say, well, it has tremendous potential value. But does food in and of itself, does a food item in and of itself have value?
Depends on how hungry you are.
Depends on how hungry you are. Okay, what else might be coming into play?
Is it good
Wow.
food?
Is it good
Right.
food? Is it even food that I get it? You know, if you get hungry enough, you'll eat anything. But, you know, in all likelihood, in our lifetimes, we're never going to experience that definition of hunger. So, unless something very dramatic changes, we have the luxury, if you will, of being able to choose what food we're going to eat and how much of it we're going to eat and all that. I hope you guys realize that compared to other places in the world and other events that are happening throughout the world, we are experiencing a bit of a luxury as we're having this discussion about food. So not everyone has food security, not everyone has food access. So I get it, I completely get it. But inside of this world where people have a choice around what food to eat, what quality of food to eat, et cetera, this value equation comes very strongly into play. So, for example, Tom and Anja are lifelong vegetarians. Brian, you're a vegetarian as well, right? Or are you vegan?
Vegetarian.
Vegetarian, okay. And so if I said to you guys, well, what if the food is meat? How much
Nope.
value do you put on that?
None.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Whatever it would cost to bury it properly.
Yeah, there you go. Say a prayer, say a prayer, say a prayer. Now they all know that I'm a carnivore and they still love me. So it's
Well,
all
we're
good.
not fascists, we're just vegetarians.
Right there you
Right.
go. Exactly.
Exactly.
I explain that
Exactly.
all the time to people.
Yeah. So, but you get the idea. It's kind of like, well, you know, sometimes how I'm going about evaluating something that is just a common thing in our daily lives. Nevertheless, my value system is being pulled into that process of evaluation. I can't say it has value. You are the only one who can decide what value it has and how much value it has to you. I can only talk about potential value. Right?
So
Mhm.
Would it be important then in the questioning process to uncover value?
Exactly. Because the sooner we can understand this, and again, when should I know this? I should have determined this back here.
Yeah.
When I'm actually talking to a client or a sales representative is talking to a prospect, whatever scenario you want to use here, this should come up there. So as far as taking care of your whatever problem is concerned, what do you hope to gain? What do you want to lose? What do you not want to gain, not want to lose? So if I said, Tom and Anja, Linda and I are getting married, we want you guys to come to our wedding. As far as the food we serve is concerned, what would you like to tell us? Okay. So
We'll pack a bag.
yeah, right. We'll pack a bag. We'll eat before we come. But in
Yeah.
fact, tell them about the with the food we served at our wedding.
Oh my gosh, Brian, it was heaven on earth. Everything was vegetarian. They got married at a Krishna temple.
Yeah,
The cake was fantastic. Oh my God.
yeah, it
Everything.
was. The only crystal memory I have of that day is dinner.
Yeah, right.
No, I'm just
No,
kidding.
No, but
Linda-
hey, you guys did win the not so newlywed contest.
Yeah, I remember the contest. I remember the rose garden. I remember Linda standing in that rose garden. Oh
I
my
remember the
God.
peacocks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the peacocks. Yeah. It was a great place. But because it was a Krishna facility, it was absolutely vegetarian. I don't think it was vegan, although I think our cheesecake, I don't think there was any
No,
dairy.
no, it was vegetarian. They used dairy products.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Anyway, so
I didn't have to ask a single question. It was fantastic, and the food was unbelievably
yeah, the
delicious.
food really was phenomenal. In fact, that's why we chose that venue for those of you who weren't invited. But next time we'll invite you. Okay, yeah. So again, it's just an illustration to say that this actually comes into play very, very frequently. As far as whatever subject is concerned, you're going to look at it and say, well, I want to gain and I want to lose this, and I don't want to gain this, and I don't want to lose this. And from this, this gives rise to a value equation, if you will. The value equation implies that you may need to trade off some of the things that you value to have something you value more. So in order to gain control on the top, you might need to sacrifice some of the stuff down below. So you might want a PhD, but you can't then say, but I don't want to go to school. Well, I'm sorry. You got to pay this price in order to get that. So sometimes or very often, there's an exchange of value, an exchange of control that has to take place.
That's such an important aspect to consider, because Dr. Robert Hartman always talks about there's a gap between our personal values and value, and then the exercising value judgment. And so he distinguished between those three in what is now known as axiology, which is value science.
Yep. And again, when we're talking about the spiral dynamic is talking about the evolution of human values. And so human values are constantly in flux. And over the course of time, as we move up that spiral, we are going to stop valuing things that we heavily valued earlier, and we're going to start valuing other things as we move up that spiral. And that's where that whole dynamic. Some people are going to be pushing us up the spiral, and some are going to be pulling us back down the spiral. But sooner or later, evolution will always win. And so sooner or later, you will evolve up that spiral dynamic. But sometimes there's a lot of kicking and screaming that happens in between. So we'll get into what's his name? Robert
Hartman.
Hartman. See, I think of the Hartman Institute as being more about right and left brain theory, but that might be somebody else. Anyway,
It's the Hartman Institute. It's at the his work is housed at the Hartman Institute, University of Tennessee.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Anywho, so the value. So the more out of control a person feels, the more valuable a solution becomes. Value is determined entirely by the individual evaluating the option. Now, we're talking about getting into a debate with somebody, argument with something. Usually, this is what's at the core of the argument, because they are valuing something or their position differently than you are valuing your position. I'm saying the mechanism on how you went about determining and assigning that value could be very different. So from their particular perspective, something may look very valuable to them, but because you don't necessarily share that perspective, you might go, I don't see any value for me because I'm not in that situation. So it's a very interesting kind of a dynamic that people kind of work through. Yep. Thoughts? All right.
No, it's true.
Yeah. And so we need to get into then, well, what exactly is value? If we're going to be talking about it, what does it mean? Value is the emotional and intellectual relationship between a person and an object or option. The emotional and intellectual relationship between a person and an object or an option, an alternative, a position, so many other words you could put there. But whenever someone is presenting to you a potential change, and you're evaluating that change to see what kind of control it's actually going to bring you or take from you, as the case may be, it's part intellectual. I would like to think it's primarily intellectual, but there's also an emotional element that's going to come into play there. And if at the end of it, you feel like there's going to be no emotional gain, but a high emotional price to be paid, and there's not going to be any intellectual gain, or maybe even an intellectual sacrifice, a logical kind of a thing, then the likelihood of you moving forward is very, very tentative at best. So you get the idea. This is that it's like we are bestowing upon it certain emotions and certain logical conclusions, if you will, beliefs, that's what the value actually is going to take the shape of. All right. Now, if we can accept that, then we can do a deeper dive. And this is where we get into, well, what are the 4 types of value that we look at? I'm not suggesting there's only 4 types. I'm just saying that it seems like the lion's share of the value discussions we've had over all these years, that value is going to fall into these 4 different categories. And you'll see on the far right side, you've got our little words from when we're looking the world around us to find out if we are as safe, as secure, as happy, and as healthy as we want to be. Well, those 4 things are really the subject matter for value, specific elements of value to kind of be, buckets, to be put into those buckets. So sometimes when we look at something, we go like, does it offer any value as far as our safety is concerned? Does it help with security? Does it make us happy? Does it help us be healthy? These are the things that we are always assessing the world around us to determine if we are there. And if we're not there, then we don't feel 2 words. What are the 2 words we don't feel?
In control.
In control. Instead, we're starting to feel 3 words.
Out of control.
Out of control. And the way that we are built as humans is that why we call this the nature of changes, because this isn't something we learned. This is part of our nature. So whenever we realize that we are not as safe, secure, happy, or as healthy as we want or need to be, nature tells us we need to do something to change that. Nature is the one who is now being the advocate of the change. Now, nature will very quickly throw certain potential changes out as suggestions. The floodwaters are rising. Perhaps you should get out of the water. So there's some things that nature will certainly provide, but there's other things that come into our life from outside sources that are telling us, if you do this, you'll be more safe, more secure, more happy, more healthy. All right, so right there, you guys should see a connection between change and value control. All these things should be coming together very, very well. Now, another thing to look at is this middle column. This middle column actually comes from French philosophy from the time of Toulouse-Lautrec and people having absinthe and all that. They were all about life, gain, goodness, and beauty. So it had value if I felt like somehow or another it would support life, and not just life as far as survival is concerned over here on the left, but they wanted life to actually be enjoyable. But I would say that falls into a merging of survival value with this goodness and beauty kind of thing that's come on there. But their priorities were life, gain, goodness, and beauty. Now, I could come up with another 6 different philosophers and how they've described these 4 in their own words, but it all gets back to these 4 types of value far on the left here: survival value, economic value, moral value, and aesthetic value. So whenever we are evaluating something, we are looking at these 4 things, and we are actually looking at these 4 things in this order if we want to make the highest quality decisions we possibly can. So the first thing I want to know is this change you're advocating, is this option something that's actually going to enhance my survival value or help me maintain my survival value? Or is that kind of a given? Is it even involved? It's not necessarily always involved, but nevertheless, it's the first thing we're going to look at. Does this option give me any benefit when it comes to survival value? All right, we'll do a deep dive later, but you guys get the idea. This is top. Why would this be the number 1 focus?
Because if you don't survive, you don't need the others.
Right, exactly. This is the prerequisite for all of this.
For breathing.
It is. It just is. So now, once we know that we are safe, in our initial discussion, we said now we turn our attention to being secure. So being secure responds to our need as humans to save things for a rainy day. Maybe that means we're squirreling away potatoes for the winter. Maybe that's about learning how to preserve food so that it's available to us beyond its natural spoilage date or whatever the case may be. So people started soaking things in oil or salting things in order to preserve things for a longer period of time. Or we learned that darkness is one way to protect things from getting too ripe too fast. So all of this was really more about economic value. Yeah, we needed the food to survive, but we were looking at some way of optimizing our resources. So those things we gathered, how could we protect them so we would have them when we needed them? So this is all about security. It's all about gain. And again, as I'm describing what I'm describing so far, the concept of money may not even have existed when our appreciation for security actually came into being. Yeah, makes sense?
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's economic value. Yeah. Now, once we know we're safe and secure, as much as the world of medicine would like us to make health our next priority, they're never going to realize that. Never, ever, 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 as long as humanity exists, will we put healthy before happy. Now, why that happens, you'll find out later on in this section on the nature of change. But I'm telling you right now, it's a given. If you think that anyone is going to sacrifice happy in the name of healthy, they got to be really unhealthy before they're going to make behavioral changes that currently make them happy. All right. Can you guys give me examples of that? In the
Losing weight.
battle between happy and healthy, why does happy win more often than not?
Because people like things like
It's
eating.
immediate.
People,
It's
instant gratification.
immediate.
Yep.
It's comforting.
Yep.
It's soothing. They use it to cover grief and other
Yep.
things.
And even if they know that that behavior is not healthy for them, at least they don't feel unhealthy enough yet to pay
Right.
attention to the price that they're paying.
Exactly.
What's going on? That makes sense. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. So between the battle between happy and healthy, happy will win over healthy far, far, far more often than not. That's a sad commentary. Maybe it should be the other way around, but that's just not the way that it operates.
Well, happy is also right the hell now. I'm happy right now.
In this moment,
But
It's-
I'm not going to be unhealthy right now. You know,
right.
it's
And
something
in
that
this
we
very
can
present
think
moment,
about.
yeah, I'm healthy enough to do something that I think it makes me happy.
Right,
Right,
right.
right. Okay, so now if you look at the middle column, again, this would have been the French philosophy back during the days of bohemian kind of focus and all that. You got to get your mind in the right space. They would talk about goodness and beauty. They believed that the only way to ever achieve happiness is by being good to oneself and those around them. So there was this idea about caring for others. In the act of caring for others, you're caring for yourself. In the act of valuing other people, you're going to end up being valued more, and that should make you happy. So their idea was not that happiness comes to you because you ate a giant donut. They're thinking, no, happy is going to come from you because you're living a life of goodness. You're living a life where there's a thoughtfulness, a consideration. So don't step on anyone's toes. Don't take anyone's freedoms away from them. Let's not be judgmental, all that kind of stuff. This was a live and let live kind of a time period, and that was all considered to be very good. Where today's world, there are a lot of behaviors that might make us happy that have got nothing whatsoever to do with morality or moral goodness. Yep. Makes sense? Yep.
This is interesting because this is Dr. Hartman, this is exactly his order of what it takes to create value. In fact, his thesis was built on the inquiry of what is good and how is goodness organized. And so his definition of good is something is good when it has all of the attributes and or properties it needs to fulfill its purpose.
Okay.
And so when he's looking at value, exactly what's described here, he said if you follow the order, you're at least position yourself in any given moment to create the greatest net value. And net value doesn't mean, you know, it's the most popular, it's the thing that create the greatest good in the moment. And it follows intrinsic, extrinsic, and then
Yeah.
systemic.
Yes.
And that's what his math, you know, his axiology is a mathematical science on how we as human beings create value in the moment. And so that's what the math is based on, because intrinsic has infinite properties, and then extrinsic, I think he called it denumerable infinite, which means we can count, but we don't know, it'll run out somewhere, we don't know where.
All right. Yep.
And then systemic, like you're either part of it or not. So it's like two opposing sides kind of a thing.
And when those things are in harmony, then this
Right.
line is met.
Right, exactly.
Yep. Okay, and then this last one is aesthetic value. So aesthetic value means that it does something to add an element of enjoyment to life. And this is a weird one because people often want me to switch happy and healthy here, but it's not. When you are living a life that values aesthetics, that means you appreciate beauty in the world around you, and beauty in all of its forms. That could be music, it could be nature, it could be whatever, that it is that ultimately creates the conditions where health can actually be achieved. So you can't be healthy in a filthy environment. So, and it was interesting. I had a client who was self-made, very successful, more money than they could ever possibly spend in their life. But they came from nothing, literally came from nothing. And we were driving around North Carolina in the area we lived in there. And it was a strange little area because it was being, a lot of gentrification was occurring. And so there were lots of homes that people built that didn't have much money or whatever the case may be, that were walking distance to a multi-million-dollar mansion. And so it's a very interesting little dichotomy. And he said something I shall never forget as we're driving around. He says, I understand people being poor. I don't understand people being dirty. And you know, it's like we look about a mobile home and he goes, I get it. People might be living in a mobile home and yeah, it might have whatever it is, but why is it filthy? Why is it falling apart? Why, you know, and I get some of it requires money to do that, but he always said that it doesn't, you know, maintaining an orderly environment doesn't cost you anything other than time and effort. And I get it. There's a limit to how, you know, how.
But the benefits are so enormous. And that's what I always said about the projects. I didn't understand why, you know, on Jefferson. I thought,
Yeah, right. It's like, I get it.
It's not, yeah, you can improve your life and your state of mind by keeping things neat and clean.
Right.
And it's an attitude, right? So because that's why you can change locations, but that same attitude follows you. So you can get into, you know, become wealthy, but if you don't change the attitude, the same behavior is going to prevail itself, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. And so when you look at these kind of lists, I think that's how I've been able to reconcile this sort of thing, that if I'm living in accordance with my moral values, I'm likely to be happy, but living in accordance with my moral values does not make me healthy. Where living within my aesthetic values may not make me as happy, but it's going to make me healthy, which I think is a condition for happiness to really be best realized. So I can figure out those works together. But as I said to my audiences then, and I say to you now, this is not a philosophy class. And so you guys can do all the deep dive into philosophy you want, but you are going to find this pattern that there are these four major categories of value that we explore when we are evaluating something. So, for example, 7, almost 8 years ago, Linda and I decided that we were going to move, and we went off on our quest to find where we were going to move. We ended up in Arizona. Specifically, we ended up in Sun City West. Why Sun City West? This was the result of a process of evaluation that we put forth. And we said, well, what about Sun City West is going to support survival value? Well, the truth is that it has a lot of, it is safe. But there's always little things happening, and you've got a community of 33,000 people, but nevertheless, it's a safe kind of an environment. It's in a safe area. As far as survival value goes, when it comes to the availability of medical care when we need it, forget health for a second. We're talking about the medical care that can keep us alive. It's walking distance. We can take our golf carts to the emergency room if we needed to. We've got a very prominent hospital right in our own community. And so when you start evaluating things, you go like, yeah, it's got all the survival value that we need. You know, it isn't prone to hurricanes. It isn't prone to earthquakes. It isn't prone to blizzards. Yeah, it gets hot. But when we think about all the other kinds of things that could represent some sort of jeopardy to our safety, a lot of those things. So bottom line, Sun City West passed muster when it came to survival value. Tom and Anja also live here. I imagine it passed muster for you guys too.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it came
No
to
snow, no snow.
yeah, there you go. Then the next thing came into economic value. So this idea about security, now it's not necessarily security when it comes to physical safety. That's up here. This is economic value. How could it be secure? So as we evaluated this, we looked at how are property values holding their own? What's the likelihood that for at least the next generation, there's going to be a strong market for someone to buy our home when we're done with it? You know, so how do we make sure the economic value is there? What's the cost of houses here? What's the cost of home maintenance here? Do we have to deal with HOAs and all that sort of stuff that comes along with it? And so is it a secure kind of a thing? Well, one of the first things people notice when they visit a Sun City community, not just Sun City West, is that almost everybody has these iron doors on their front, like gates, iron gates. And they think like, is that because it's an unsafe area? And the answer, no, it's because the people that these houses were originally built for were not expected to live here year round. They're expected to go away for half of the year and, escape the heat of the summer. And so you need a way you could really lock up your house. Over time, those have become far more attractive than they were initially, but the point is still there. The vast majority of us have the option of pressing a few buttons and turning a few keys, and we can turn our homes into fortresses. So also we can go on our way. So when it comes to security and the economic value, another economic value that came here was because we have so much sun, what's the likelihood that we could go solar? And the answer is, oh yeah, this is easy. This is easy to do. Okay, so you guys, Tom, Anja, economic value, did it check the boxes for you guys then?
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Absolutely, absolutely. When it came to moral value, we're talking about now about goodness. Community falls in the category of moral value. And so we kind of wanted to have lots of things available to us because we know that one of the worst things that happen to people as they age in the population is loneliness. And we wanted to make sure that we were in a community that was kind of engineered, designed, built with an aging population in mind. So there's a gazillion social activities that one could do. By the way, we're starting to tip our toe a little bit into the healthy part as well. But this is an active community. There's lots of things you can do if you want to go out there and choose something to do. And so there's that. People do care for one another, regardless of what any individual's beliefs happen to be. We look out for one another's houses. And so when the snowbirds are gone during the summer months, you got to believe all of us are always just keeping an eye out for what's going on, with their house.
The Firebirds are on alert.
Yeah, the Firebirds are on alert whenever the snowbirds are gone. And now the snowbirds are back, which I don't mind telling you guys, as Tom and Anja also live here year round. Oh, we dread the day they come back. You have no idea. So suddenly the roads are busy, I mean, over half the community is gone. And I was cautioned once on Facebook when I was talking about locking up the house, or where they said, you shouldn't tell people that you're going to be gone for a while. And I said, anyone who knows these kinds of communities know that anytime during the summer, you can pick any house at random, and there is a 50% plus chance that the house is not occupied. So it's just the way the things are down here. So, yeah. Okay, but the point is that we do care about one another. We do try to be a little bit involved. Some people get too involved in certain things that end up harshing our mellow and compromising our happy space. But nevertheless, anytime you get a bunch of old people together, there's going to be plenty of old farts. And yeah, so
And there's plenty of young farts too.
there's plenty of young farts. Yeah.
Always
what's
something
the
interesting
age
going
of
on.
them?
What's that?
What is the age for the community?
You at least one person in the household has to be 55 years old.
We
Ah,
consider
okay.
that to be a youngster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I was the baby. When I moved here, I was 56, and I was the baby in the community up until last year, I think. When we had someone moving across the street, and he's a year younger than I am, I think, or a few years younger than I am. But I was the baby.
Interesting.
I gotta believe, Angie, you got to be the baby in your neighborhood, right?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, anywho, but yeah, our idea of being a baby is 55 years old.
Well, there
So,
are younger people too, because
yeah.
people who are younger than them, they're just not in the house. They're not on a lien. But
Yeah, they're
more-
not at least, right, exactly. Yep. Okay, and so the moral value is there. We felt like these are going to be good people that we can, count on and on and on. Great community, that's all true. That met those requirements. Now you get to aesthetic value, and I'm going to make it sound like it's more important than some of these other things, but one of the
Ding, ding,
best
ding,
things
ding.
we can tell you about Sun City West is this place is clean.
Oh my gosh,
I
yes.
mean, you're talking about 17,500 homes scattered over several square miles of space. And we can tell you that if you go down the road and you see anyone who's even got weeds growing in their yard, that's rare. And that person is old and needs some help. So, they just can't maintain their property anymore, but they haven't transitioned to assisted living or anything like that yet.
And
So
if you find a Cheetos bag blowing around, it's only because we had a high wind and somebody just accidentally didn't close their
the lid on their garbage. Yeah. So David and Brian, you guys might find this rather shocking to know that our garbage cans are underground. And so
Wow.
Bless
underground,
them.
yeah, there's a lid that's a metal lid that's close to your driveway. And when you lift it up, there's a proper, 50, not 55 gallon, but probably 40 some odd gallon trash can that's in there. And so the guys that pick up the trash, they come along, they lift the lid, they pull out your big bucket, and they dump it in the back. They do that twice a week. And probably the most startling thing about the crew that picks up our garbage is that they run nonstop.
And they laugh and they smile and they're in
I
good.
love it. These guys are great, absolutely
Wow.
great, but they
It's
run.
weird.
It is
It's
weird.
very weird. They run down the street doing their work, and if you say hello, they look at you and wave and smile. Hi.
Yep,
And if you
yep.
give them a gift card at Christmas time, they're like, "Oh my gosh, wow, thanks."
Oh,
If you give
thanks.
them
Yeah, you gotta go like
water on a hot day, same thing. It's there.
yeah, it doesn't matter. You could be in the hottest day of the summer. These guys are going to be running, and I mean running all out, because our houses aren't extremely far apart, but there's it's a
a
proper
distance.
house and a proper piece of land, and they run.
Oh, and T,
Yep.
in the summer, your trash is picked up between 6:45 and 7:30.
Yep.
Then they're gone from Sun City West. And in the winter, it's 6 a.m. And by 6:30 in the morning in the winter, they're gone.
They're
No,
gone.
I'm sorry, it's
They're
the
gone.
opposite. It's 7.
Same
In
thing.
summer,
Same thing with recycling. Same thing with
Yeah.
recycling.
Yeah.
you don't even know they're trash. I mean,
No. And so the place is always clean.
Wow.
Yeah. And the streets are wide.
People.
We've got 4 recreation centers and 9 golf courses. I'm not a golfer, but there's some great little beautiful moments. You feel like you're living on a park.
Yes.
kind of a setting. And so when it comes to aesthetic value, the aesthetic value here is extremely high. And that does promote this healthiness, you know, when you go outside and you see the mountains and you know, a blue sky literally every day.
And there's no
Yeah,
high building, so you see the sky. It is
see the
amazing.
sky. You
Wow.
see the palm trees.
Hey, don't forget the entertainment value of the golf course.
Oh,
Some of
that's
the
right.
golfers are fantastic and some of them are hilarious. And I've actually seen someone beat the ground with his club and swear.
Yeah, they do. They take it so seriously. But going back to entertainment, there's also a full entertainment schedule here. There's always concerts going on. And some there's a charge for, but most of them are free. And
Yep.
yeah. Anyway, so my point
Lots of
is,
them are outdoors.
yes, yeah, because like we can go outside, Brian, and watch movies under the stars.
Mhm.
So,
Wow.
and you know, whenever I story like, well, what are we going to do if it rains? Rain?
We're gonna praise the Lord and do some dancing in the
Yeah,
street.
yeah, because that's
what
when
we're gonna
everyone
do.
takes off their clothes and starts jumping up and down. Not a pretty sight overall, but
But happy nonetheless.
they're happy nonetheless. All right, so anyway, I just wanted to walk you guys through this process playing out in real life. So regardless of what the decision is you're trying to make, you're going to go through this process of evaluating it from this you know, control kind of perspective. Is it going to bring you the kinds of value that you really want? And if it is good points, you're going to get there. Now, why didn't we move to the Sun City community in Palm Springs instead? It was really all about they met the survival value, no problem. Moral value, no problem. Aesthetic value, no problem. They might have even been better in some of these, but the value equation, the same house that we live in here, if we bought it there, would have cost at least double. And the pieces of land were smaller, and we pay an annual fee, but their annual fee was 4 times what ours is. And so it failed on the economic value part of
Well,
the
we also have fewer rules and more space. We have larger lots and
Yep.
we have fewer arbitrary rules about how
That's
many plants you need and what colors you can use in your back if you live on the golf course.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, a lot of it, they try to control that. And even things like the Sun Cities, there are 2 of them in they call it the Inland Empire, but that's the desert area where Palm Springs is located. There's not a hospital inside of either one of those Sun City communities because they're not large enough to have the kind of amenities that we have here. But anyway,
Interesting.
I just
So I
bring
have
this
to
all
get,
up.
I got to get a little older.
Well, you can buy the house.
Or marry someone older.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's
But-
true. Yes.
But actually, the advice we would give to anyone and everyone is that if you ever think you might want to live here, the time to buy the house is sooner rather than later. You
Mhm.
don't have to be 55 to own a house here. You just have to be one person in the house has to be 55 to live in the house. Everybody else can be fine, but there are no schools, so you can't have kids here. I mean, you know, there's just no.
Yeah.
No schools, so we don't pay school
Another
taxes.
plus.
Another economic value, we don't pay school taxes. Well,
Mm.
part of the community does, but most of it doesn't. Depends where you were. All right, again, I just wanted to walk you through this process of valuation, but to make it really real, you guys need to do this for yourself. So no doubt in the next week, you're going to need to make some sort of decision of one or another. Just stop for a moment and ask yourself, what survival value does this bring me? What economic value, moral value, aesthetic value? And if you don't like these words, survival, economic, moral, aesthetic, you can stick with safe, secure, happy, healthy, or life, gain, goodness, and beauty. Any of this works just fine. So now, when we speak again, we're going to talk about how even if something meets everything in your value equation, even if something gives you all the control you want and doesn't take away the control you want to hang on to, there is still no guarantee yet that you're going to follow through and do what needs to be done. So we're going to talk about a couple more things about control, but we're going to get into dysfunction. Why is it that a species that has endured as long as this one has and has achieved what this one has continues to make profoundly stupid decisions?
Hmm.
So we're going to look into that and see where it goes on. Why we get frustrated by people who just don't seem to see the light. It's like, what's wrong with them? So we're gonna explore that in detail. All right. With that, any final questions, comments?
Good.
All right. I will tell you guys that I have never spent this much time talking about the nature of change ever. So even people who get fully certified to teach this program don't get this deep dive into this. And so I'm having fun, really just saying, like, forget time on the clock. Let's just work our way through these and really pull out of it everything there is to pull out of it.
I like the deep dive because you know what I see as a challenge oftentimes when it comes to value in particular is this idea of the gap between the subjective perception of
Yes.
what would create value and the objective reality of what would.
Yeah.
So,
So-
there's that gap. And so we see people like just, without the ability to close that gap, it seems like we're experiencing, again, this kind of, I don't know what you call it, but just this tribalism of like,
Right.
no, you just don't agree. So your otherism or this other, any other kind of ism is out there. It's just,
yeah.
doesn't make
Well,
sense.
we've
It
talked a
doesn't.
little bit about pendulum swinging. One of the pendulums we can look at is when the pendulum swings away from being centric to being to either of the extremes. It's a pendulum, so it's going to swing from one to the other, but it swings very fast through the center and goes to another extreme. Look at the way a pendulum moves.
That's
That's a good one.
interesting.
I like
Yeah.
that.
And the only way to get it more functional, if you will, is to find some way to better contain the extremes, narrow the range, if you will, of how far that spectrum is from one extreme to the other extreme. Because
Wow.
think about that. If I'm a pendulum and I'm swinging from one extreme to the other, the further those extremes are apart, thanks to gravity, my little pendulum is going to swing faster.
Yeah, it's getting more
Oh.
momentum.
Right. It's got the
Yeah.
momentum behind it. And that means I'm going to be bouncing from one extreme to another. And all I'm doing is seeing the center, out the window.
Yes.
Mhm.
So we got to find some way to bring the extremes closer to the middle. And that's where the work really needs to be done.
And this is nature, what you just
Yeah.
described is exactly human nature to always side with the subjective things that we learned and we're identified with.
Yeah, because we think we can count on those.
Right, right.
They were only true under that set of circumstances and not perhaps the new set of circumstances. So,
That's
yeah.
why I like that core aspect self-control, because what it gets to is, okay, wait, these things have served me up until this point, but does that mean it's still valid now?
Yep.
Yeah, excellent.
Life
Thank you.
changes fast. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll pick up where we left off next time. So bye for now.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Dobranoc.
Have a great day, everyone.
You too.